Hey there, it's Bram Kanstein, and in this episode of Bitcoin for Millennials, I'm joined by Matt Manning. He's a writer, coach, and the mind behind the Liminal Leap, where he explores how Bitcoin, AI, and human consciousness are transforming the world and our place in it.
I don't think most of the general population sees that the old system is already dying. It's falling away.
In this conversation, we'll unpack how Bitcoin cracked open his worldview, how paradigm shifts in consciousness are unfolding, and why the intersection of Bitcoin, AI, and evolving human awareness matters now more than ever. If you enjoy this episode, please like this video on YouTube and subscribe on here, or follow me on your favorite podcasting platform to help me reach more people and spread the message of Bitcoin even further. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Now let's dive in. All right, Matt Manning, welcome to Bitcoin for Millennials.
Yeah, Bram, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Likewise, man. I love that you are focusing on Bitcoin, AI, and consciousness. Those are probably the three topics that I think about every day. So I think we'll have a really nice conversation around that, and I hope the people listening will enjoy it. But before we dive in, I saw that you had a pretty successful career in tech and sales, but at one point you had the realization that you didn't want to do that anymore and you walked away. What was kind of like the moment or realization that made you decide to focus on, Bitcoin, AI, and consciousness?
Yeah, it was kind of a gradually and then suddenly type experience. So, we can get more into the story, but Bitcoin initially is what kind of cracked me open. It was such a paradigm shift for me that I started to question everything essentially. And over a number of years that led to pretty big identity shift. And I had studied psychology and had always been interested in kind of consciousness and some of the more inner work. And I started to feel pulled back to that. I had a successful career, like you mentioned, in sales, and then at some point, I was like, oh, I'll eventually get back into that. And then, about 4 months ago, it hit me and I just went for it. So, I quit my job 4.5 months ago and just kind of following my heart and trusting that something's emerging. But I'm sensing into that humanity is going through such a massive shift that we need more and more people to, step outside of the normal and be willing to create something new.
Yeah. So what was it that made you either go into Bitcoin or see more than what you perhaps initially thought that Bitcoin would bring you? I mean, this is a common theme that people have. I think practically it's kind of like, once you realize that you were lied to about money, which is arguably the most important technology that people use to communicate with each other, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bitcoin, I got into it in 2018 after the bull run up to like 20K, and I didn't know too much about it, but it crashed back down, and I had some friends that started to kind of give me the blockchain crypto pitch, and I got in and put a little bit of money in. And my personality is one that once I'm into something, I like to understand it really deeply. So I went pretty deep down the rabbit hole, and the first year was like kind of confusing to try to sift through all the noise with Bitcoin versus crypto. And I couldn't figure out what the crypto people were talking about. And eventually I kind of settled on the Bitcoiners, like they were talking about the biggest problems in the world. First principles, big macro problems, inflation, money printing, energy, geopolitics, all of that. And so, I started to really deconstruct the whole system. And I came to that conclusion that you mentioned, that everything I thought I knew about money and that I had been taught about money was wrong. And it was such a paradigm shift that caused me to start questioning, well, if I was wrong about that, and the things I'd been taught about that, like what other basic assumptions that I have that I've just been taught, whether it's from my family, from a school system, from society in general, like what else am I missing? And that really started me to start questioning and looking pretty deeply at my most basic assumptions. And that led to a whole, I say Bitcoin is an ego test in a lot of ways. You have to be willing to admit you were wrong. But in my experience, it's kind of a warm up. Uh, some of the deeper consciousness ego tests are the real tests, and I don't think they're two separate things. I think Bitcoin is a catalyst for some shifts that are happening globally.
Yeah. So many things to pull on, I think. I think on one side there is some courage needed that I didn't know I had, that in a sense, to really challenge what I thought was my understanding of a certain topic, right? Or anything I attached to that, and realizing that I was doing that in a totally unconscious way. Just sitting with that realization, I think, was already very interesting, right? Like just getting there, but then being triggered to a degree.
Yeah, similar to you, like I started to listen to the Bitcoiners pretty heavily like 2019, about a year after I had gotten in and gravitated toward Bitcoin only. I didn't really see the use case for crypto. And then, COVID happened and everything that these Bitcoiners had been talking about, like light bulbs started to go off. And frankly, during that period, I got really pessimistic about the world when I started to understand like where the financial system was going, the end game, and all of the manipulation. And I felt like I was in the Matrix because I was seeing things that and I would bring it up and people didn't really agree with it. My family, I was they thought I was a little bit crazy. But yeah, similar to your experience where, it was kind of an invitation. And then from there, I think the other thing that kind of opened me up, and looking back on it, I was projecting a lot of my own anxiety internally onto like the global situation. And I had pretty significant anxiety since a pretty young age. And, just my nervous system was kind of uh, high alert all the time. And then, I'm going through that kind of, well, I was probably in my early 30s, like 3 young kids. And, one of them was special needs. And so like, I was just feeling the pressure. And so I started to do more meditation and going inward with like some of the questions around like why does my anxiety, why am I like this, and why do I react certain ways to different situations. And studying meditation and developmental psychology really kind of led to a profound identity shift. But I find like in that journey of like, I think globally we're on this evolutionary journey. Society, it's at a critical juncture. I call it a liminal moment where the old is passing away and the new hasn't quite yet been birthed. Like we have to create something new. And I find that happens personally as well in our own personal developmental journeys, is like you have to let the old that has served you well pass away for something new to emerge. And you have to be okay with some volatility. And so Bitcoin in a way is like training to be able to like find a place of stillness amongst all this volatility and hold and like trust the longer term pattern that's emerging. And so I started to see these connections between like the inner side of how we develop and how society is developing. And it led to some profound shifts.
Bitcoin custody is evolving, and OnRamp is leading this change with multi-institution custody, eliminating single points of failure. Instead of relying on one institution, OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a cold storage multi-sig vault backed by 3 independent custodians, where no single party can move your funds alone, providing an unprecedented level of security. Your assets are protected by a 100 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy, with all transactions fully auditable on-chain and only executed at your direction. This means complete transparency and control over your assets at all time. Beyond custody, OnRamp provides comprehensive Bitcoin services that include trading, lending, inheritance planning, and IRAs. You can view them as your private Bitcoin banking partner tailored to your wealth preservation goals. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or an experienced holder, OnRamp's approach helps you secure your generational wealth with unmatched security and peace of mind. You can sign up at onrampbitcoin.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. If you first want to learn more, you can also book a free consultation via their website to speak with one of their Bitcoin custody experts. Tell them you came through me, and they'll take extra good care of you. There are so many people that have a similar experience, right? I think I'm also one of them, in the sense that, yeah, when you're triggered about something that you realize that you had no clue about, right? So money in this case, and you start going down the rabbit hole of studying, what is actually money? Why, what is Bitcoin? Why would that be a solution? Why not all the other cryptos and whatnot, right? And you eventually, I wonder what it is for you, but I got to the point where I now see, the data in the Bitcoin blockchain, or in the time chain rather, right? Like the ledger of Bitcoin is basically engineered truth. It's the ultimate truth of this system. That's the whole point of this system, is that there's a base layer of truth upon which people do things. They act with an incentive that's aligned to this truth at this base layer.
Yeah, and I'm starting to see it like more clearly as I've studied some of the more like Eastern, meditative, like these paths that some of these mystical traditions have been talking about for thousands and thousands of years. And when you overlay it with the Bitcoiner journey, like there's so many similarities in that, like, hey, reality isn't actually exactly how you've constructed it to be. A lot of what your reality is just a story that you've created to have certainty and to, and that's useful as we grow up. Like we need that. Children need rules that are black and white, and they need certainty to be able to grow. And then at some point, something cracks and you realize that, oh, maybe reality isn't exactly like I thought it was. And, you start to see something new. And then from there, like my experience is like, you want to tell everybody about it, right? Like Bitcoin, you want to talk to every person about it. And especially early on in my journey, I'm not sure how this was for you, but I was really into like trying to convince people about Bitcoin, but it was probably coming from a place of just needing to be right. Like, hey, I've thought about this, I'm right. And people would sense into that, and it wasn't received as well. And that's similar in like the consciousness. A lot of people want to start talking about it like, hey, like people go do these psychedelic experiences and hey, no, reality isn't as it seems, and they want to preach and be right about it. But then over time, you start to realize that people are going to be ready for it when they're ready for it. And there's less of this need to be right. And I think that's where the maturity starts to come in. And so I'm starting to just see so many parallels between the Bitcoiner journey and this journey of consciousness that, in my experience, they're both very deep rabbit holes.
Yeah. I'm trying to tell more people about Bitcoin. I know what this is, and I also know that I cannot orange pill other people like you orange pill yourself, right? So whether there are, I don't know, 2,000 people that by listening to my podcast eventually get into Bitcoin, or 2 people, doesn't really matter. It would be cool if there's more, but if there's 2, right? Like, I don't know, like I get a message, I think every week from someone, like that is already enough. No messages is also
totally
enough in that sense, right? So it's more from, okay, I feel that this is something that is valuable and more people should know. That's why I'm doing this, but I'm okay with where I'm at internally. Like there is no outside validation needed anymore.
Yeah, and what I'm starting to see is that even Bitcoin, like I'm super bullish on Bitcoin, and I think it's a total catalyst to a whole new world that is going to be created. Like the old systems, I don't think most of the general population sees that the old system is already dying. It's falling away. And, we have the opportunity to build something new. And the base layer is we're so early. There's so many things that are going to be built on top of it to enable the future of humanity. And same with AI. But I'm also starting to tap into, it's not just technology that is going to do that. Like, the technology itself is only as good as the consciousness behind what's being created on it. So with AI, if we don't evolve consciousness and have more awakened hearts and people that are in it for the right reasons, then because if not, we'll just create the same problems we did in the old system on top of new technology. And same thing with Bitcoin. And so, uh, I think Bitcoin fixes a lot of things, but Bitcoin and AI without more awakened consciousness and people who are much more aware of their own ego, their own projections, and being able to step back and see all the different perspectives and include all sorts of different ideas, like that's what we need. And I think Bitcoin helps to do that because, like in my own journey, Bitcoin was the catalyst. And if you adopt the Bitcoin standard over time, money that gets more valuable, you have more time and you can get out of that fight or flight mode where you're just having to do anything to provide for your family, to beat inflation, to do all of these things. It gives people time to actually connect to their heart and connect to their soul and connect to what matters and build something real. So like, I think the two things are very interconnected, but I also am very passionate that we need more maturity emotionally, even among Bitcoiners. Like, I think Bitcoiners are very altruistic, and sometimes the whole like shouting and like Bitcoin maximalism can be good. I also think we have an opportunity to kind of like upshift our messaging and have it come out of love instead of like, we're right, you're wrong.
I agree. Eventually we are all in this together. So
Yeah,
it's
and I'm
about
with you.
connecting.
Like, I think we need all sorts of different voices, and there's a time and a place for the more, uh, aggressive messaging, because sometimes that's what people need. I also think that, like, generally speaking, that's the type of messaging we have that leads to more and more polarity
Mhm.
and division. And so, I think it's as Bitcoin evolves, we're going to have to get more mature in how we message and how we connect to people, and that they can feel the place that it's coming from. And yeah, and I see that more and more. Like, I love Bitcoiners, like the philosophical, spiritual aspects of Bitcoin are starting. I've been waiting for that type of conversation. In the last year, it's like really starting to ramp up. So I'm really optimistic for where things are, and there's a time and a place to tell someone to have fun staying poor.
It is figuring out this duality that you have, right? Like, on the one side, that we are all the same, we are all, this is my current understanding now, right? Or what I think is most probable, like we are all um like an individual piece of consciousness from the eternal consciousness, and you are in your meat suit and I'm in my meat suit, right? And eventually we are all the same, but just our experience right now here is different, with different challenges and opportunities and etc. And if you constantly approach it like that, I think it's really nice to see everyone as equal. But in the practicality, that's more in the metaphysical realm. But in the physical reality, you do see all these different types of actions that people do, right? And opinions that they hold, and if they're lazy or actually doing the work. And I think, when we talk about the whole corruption of money, it is because of other people in this physical reality that are actually um, using a system in an abusive way, right? So I
Mhm.
think that just that tension is interesting.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of tension, and it's coming to the forefront. And I actually think the tension is good in my experience. Leaning into tension and discomfort on the other side of that is growth. And we're seeing that globally and systemically. Like, there's a lot of tension happening. And we have there's on the when you're talking about duality, like there's a myriad of different possibilities. I'm quite optimistic about what can be born for humanity this next 5 or 10 years. And there is going to be increasing polarization because some ideas, let's be honest, like people we can respect and give respect to different opinions. That doesn't mean we have to agree and that all ideas are equal. There are things that are objectively better than others. And so yeah, we need to be able to come up with solutions that can create the new systems for what's emerging, because let's be honest, like and I think millennials, like your audience, millennials have a big role to play on what's going to be created for the world that's emerging. I think they're an archetypal kind of generation that's in between. We were born with technology, but just as it was emerging, so we kind of see what's taking place, and I think we have a big role to play in what's going to emerge. But yeah, I totally agree with you that the tension is good, and on the flip side of it, like if we get it wrong and we don't upshift consciousness, and it's still like this dualistic fighting forever, we'll just have new technology to like accelerate the demise of what didn't work in the existing system.
Yeah. Which is obviously a nudge to AI that we'll get into. But before we dive into that, you mentioned, there's a more global shift in consciousness happening, true paradigm shifts, if I may, how, based on what you've studied and come across, how do you look at what is happening there, and maybe a bit more in general to take people along, like how do individuals and societies evolve through breakdown, insight, integration, growth, etc., like this kind of like eternal loop of their development?
Yeah, I've done a lot of studying. One of my interests is developmental psychology. So, for those that are interested, I don't want to get too into the weeds of, developmental theory. People's eyes will glaze over. But, people like Ken Wilber, if people are interested in looking at his frameworks, they've really influenced me. The gist of that domain, it's come online in the last 50 or so years. And it's that individuals, we see it in childhood, like children grow through different stages of consciousness, new capabilities come online. And it's a nested system. So very much like Bitcoin, you need the base layer to be healthy. And then there's new capability and more complexity that comes online with each new phase of consciousness or growth. And so there's different shifts that happen. We don't need to go into detail into all of the exact shifts, but they're finding that those same shifts happen throughout adulthood. So adults continue to develop, new capacities come online, and you're able to hold more complexity. And it's not to say that those base layer, really black and white things that you learned as a child aren't useful anymore. You have to build on top of them and know what to use when. And so individuals develop through these, and to shift at certain stages is profoundly disorienting because you have to shed what you thought and who your identity had been built to let something new emerge. And so, that happens in like midlife crises that people are going through. There's an identity shift that's happening, and if you're not willing to let go of the old identity and let something new emerge, that can get really hairy and challenging. And so, but those same shifts that happen for individuals, society goes through those exact same stages as a collective. And so, my opinion is that right now we're going through a pretty big shift in a developmental stage within society. And that leads to a lot of discomfort because the old systems that used to work and that were beneficial for us, that got us through the Industrial Revolution, that we could create so many great things out of. All of a sudden, the internet comes along and AI comes along, And these systems just are not built for the speed of technology and the economic system that needs growth and debt and consumption forever and more jobs and all of those things. We've got these deflationary forces fighting exactly against it. And so there has to be a new operating system. So that's what I look at, like each stage of development. It's kind of like upgrading the OS to this new operating system, and it builds on the old. There's things that were built on the old OS that you still need, but you need a whole new operating system. And so that's where I think we're at collectively. And it's technological, and it's distinctly related to consciousness. So my experience in making these big shifts is that it can be really hard. And you can go through some disorienting periods. And I think that's what's happening with us globally. And so, there's a tendency to like resort back to the old ways when something new is shifting that's unknown. You'll actually resort back to like the stage below because it's more certain. And so that's what I see happening in government and in these different things, is like we're grasping back onto the old ways of like authoritarianism and, people just telling us what's right and wrong. And that just isn't going to work. So we have to make space for the new to emerge, but it's totally unknown. And it's disorienting because there is no map for what's being built. We have to go build it.
I also saw in another a podcast you did, like you mentioned that consciousness develops in predictable terms, right? It's not like a woo woo type thing, but more like you mentioned, upgrading the operating system. But that goes through kind of like seasons, right? There's spring and summer, and then that's the seasons of life, and then you have seasons of death, and you have to prepare for the new year again, right? And so I think what we're talking about is those seasons, but on a different level of where humanity is in time and space. And I think this is a nice segue into AI. There is a reason that AI and Bitcoin and this larger global shift in consciousness are happening at the same time, because like you said, how are you going to value the extreme deflationary forces that AI brings as a technology? Like, you cannot do that with the system that we've used to value, or at least price value, right? Which is an inflationary force. And I think, in Broken Money, Lynn Alden's book, she talks about this. And I think like that illustration is very, very powerful. Then you see that there's this war going on between these forces that are basically going against some sort of natural way of change that just constantly happens.
Yeah, there's definitely a natural evolution. And the more I look at it in these different frameworks, and all of these frameworks are just frameworks, they're just models. So, like at some point, even those models break down, and those can't become a religion that we're so, invested in that it's the only way to view things. But I do think some of the models are helpful. And, while you were talking, it's interesting. I think of like the fourth turning. I'm sure you're familiar with the fourth turning model. So there's that model, and then there's all sorts of different models from different indigenous people, the Kali Yuga. And what I'm seeing is like all of these models are converging on this time, like these next 10 years or so. Like so many of the models are coming together, pointing to massive change in humanity. And then when you overlay it with the kind of developmental psychology models of the evolution of consciousness, I'm just starting to trust it, that like this is how change happens. And you look at it across history, there's massive paradigm shifts that have to happen, and there's usually wars fought around it and massive breakdown and like a lot of suffering, but that's what has to happen for the new to emerge. And yeah, like I'm with you. AI, yeah, like the more you study the monetary system, I mean, try to make an argument for how this thing ends on the existing system. there's not a lot of intelligent arguments about how we fix the problems. It's just kicking the can down the road, and it's getting more and more clear. It's the root of so much of our dysfunction. And yeah, for it to continue to work, we need more money, more debt, more jobs. We need more everything. And like Jeff Booth said, you can't fix the climate crisis within that system because you have to have consumption forever. And so people think you can just throw more money at it, and then AI is coming in and taking jobs away. It's the productivity increases. I don't think we're quite ready for what's going to happen with AI.
If you want to self-custody your Bitcoin stack, I recommend the Blockstream Jade Plus. I've been using this premium Bitcoin-only hardware wallet for a few months now, and I love its design and ease of use. What makes it stand out is its open source hardware and software, and Blockstream's unique genuine check, which makes sure that your device is authentic. No backdoors or compromises. You can connect with the Jade Plus however you want. Bluetooth, USB-C, or you can go fully air-gapped with its built-in camera for cable-free QR transactions. The metal case feels solid and the color screen is easy to read. And it connects with your favorite Bitcoin apps like Blockstream Green, Sparrow, and Electrum. Get your Jade Plus today at store.blockstream.com and use code BRAM to get 10% of your entire order. Let's talk about something that not a lot of people think about before it's too late. Where are you storing your Bitcoin seed words? Are they truly secure? I found my solution with Stampseed. It's an elegant all-in-one titanium plate solution with no separate pieces to lose or manage. Your seed phrase gets permanently stamped into pure titanium that withstands fire, survives water, and lasts for generations. Unlike shallow etching methods, Stampseed's patented tools help you to deeply stamp every letter for permanent readability, protecting your financial legacy. When you order a titanium seed plate from Stampseed, you can also upload a custom design or your logo to customize the back of your plate to make it fully personalized. Paper seed phrases are a disaster waiting to happen. Secure your Bitcoin with Stampseed for decades to come. Visit stampseed.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to get 15% off your order.
One way that I look at it, in some of these different traditions, like, in the Buddhist and in some of the more Eastern traditions, the yogic system, some of the systems in India and in the East in general, they've talked for a long time how there's knowing in the mind, there's knowing in the heart, and there's knowing in the body. And my opinion is that largely in the West, we've just worshiped the intellect and the mind. And if you're smart, like that's one way of knowing, and the mind is very powerful. But all of a sudden, like, AI is severely outpacing our capacity for ones and zeros and binary mathematical logic and connecting ideas. And so, what's the differentiator now from us versus AI? And it's a nervous system, it's a heart, it's a body, it's intuition, and being able to contextualize all of this data. And so I think we have an opportunity with AI to like really tap into our nervous systems and have more regulated nervous systems, because I think the existing financial system, the incentives make it so our nervous systems are like totally overstimulated. The mental health, anxiety, depression, all of that is on the rise. And with this freedom that AI is going to bring, we have to learn to actually be embodied. And I think that's going to be a trend for the next, little bit. And the people who are most regulated and who are most embodied are going to have superpowers compared to the rest of society.
So many things I'm thinking about. You just said Kali Yuga, which I think is interesting because that touches, so the Kali Yuga is like you could say like the cosmological phase that we're in, or the astrological phase that we're in, however you approach that, right? So however we are moving through the universe, our solar system, etc., moves in cycles, and it goes from basically through these seasons, right, from light to dark. And the Kali Yuga is like the winter of that, right? So we're moving from that space in space basically to something new, right? And so if you believe that we are guided by something that is bigger than us, like literally our place in the in the universe, then that is something that is affecting, you know, our little meat suits here on Earth. And so that's why that you could see that as a very natural thing, and that like new, like the problems that are arising, but also the solutions that are bubbling up, right? That I think, you know, we're mentioning here, like Bitcoin and AI are there for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we then, so I just want to touch upon that, because you said Kali Yuga. I think it's just, you know, for the people that are interested in that, like it's when you dive into this consciousness rabbit hole again, right? There's parts of yourself that you find, but there's also a lot that you think is outside of you, but is actually also happening inside of you, you know, like as above, so below part, basically.
Yeah, and just my overarching point there is just so many of these models are converging on this time.
Exactly.
So
yes.
Whether you believe in them or not, like I just find it like I just find it really interesting that, like, you know, across different traditions and across the world, these cycles, macro cycles that different cultures have been tracking, like so many of them are converging right now.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that. Yeah.
Maybe a fun side thought is that cycle is 28,000 years. So do you think that after one cycle, people figured out this was multiple cycles? This was an actual cycle, right? It happens again. Or do you at least need a minimum of 2 of these cycles to have some sort of, you know, guess probability as to that this is something that continues? So if you calculate that and then think about how far advanced you should be as a civilization, you will also end up in some corner realizing that what you think you know about civilization and how far they were in terms of technology and understanding the universe is also not aligned with the reality of this knowledge being present as well, right? So
yeah. And my thoughts are that, you know, this evolutionary process is really big and really long and can take a lot of time for humanity to evolve. And everything I'm seeing is pointing to, like, what we're about to go through in the next 10 years being such a seismic shift that, like, you know, what happens in centuries is going to happen in a few years. Like the amount of progress is going to be really fast. And I don't, so that's where I think it requires a whole new operating system in our nervous systems and the way we think, the way we engage with each other. I'm really excited about it. And I'm inspired by the millennial kind of group. And I think that's why I'm excited to be on this podcast, because I think millennials have a deep role to play in what's happening. So yeah.
Well, I think we are in the place where we are moving into further adulthood, one, I think, in further power, two, right? Like so people are growing up, they're moving into certain positions, they're moving in towards more wealth. So
yeah, more influence.
Yeah, exactly. So they have more influence. So understanding the shifts that are happening, and I think either what you can do with it or how you can contribute to it are two very big topics, and I think are under discussed. So I'm happy we are having this conversation. Like, but how can we make this more practical? Like, how can people view? I think we touched upon Bitcoin a bit, but like Bitcoin and AI as these external catalysts for these internal inquiries or shifts in consciousness. Like how have you experienced that, or maybe what have you learned from other people that on this journey?
Yeah, I mean, my view is that decentralization is this just overarching theme that's happening, and it's not just in the financial system. Like, I see it happening in spirituality, where people don't want to outsource, like, to some organization to just tell them what to believe. They want to experience it themselves. And so I think decentralized spirituality, the realization that, like you were talking about how we're all one, and it's my belief that we're like the human, we are the supercomputer, and we are all each a node on the network that's connected through ways that aren't typical, like we can't access through the typical human senses, but there's a deeper connection that's happening. And so when you kind of exit the matrix and start to see life in a different way, and you go inward and you start to connect to like your own heart, your soul, what you're good at, your own passions, like the things that, like the question I like to ask is, if money weren't a thing, if I knew if money was taken care of and success was guaranteed, what would I go do? Like, what am I that passionate about that I can go build that helps humanity? And so I think Bitcoin allows us to be able to do that. And with more and more people tapping into that, like my belief is that we each have creative capacities and a purpose within us that can benefit humanity, and that we can have joy and like have a ton of energy to work toward. But the existing financial system doesn't allow that. It stifles creativity from a really young age. It tells you exactly what to believe. It just turns you into a productivity worker that has to go, just beat inflation, and you're stuck, and you can't tap into like those deeper capacities that are inside of you. And so the more you can do some of that inner work and deconstruct your own and do some of that challenging work, I find the more it opens up for you to be more spontaneous and to like really see what it is that you can bring to the world. And so if we can get more Bitcoiners to awaken to that and like really follow their own soul's purpose with the knowledge of Bitcoin and some of these systems, like we can build so many amazing things on top of it that can benefit everybody. And in a deflationary world where money gets more valuable over time, we have the time to do that. And just imagine a world where people are so connected and have energy because they're doing what they like and they're doing what they enjoy. I think this next 10 to 15 years is going to allow us to do that if we get it right.
Yeah, I fully agree. I don't I don't think that's a surprise, but I also am just realizing that not many people are talking about this, and also how, again, this ties it back to the money. And I think what you just said is exactly why I said, the broken money also keeps you stuck in this physical reality or in your body too much, right? Like feeling that anxiety or the growing uncertainty towards the future and the worrying about the future, right?
Or disconnected from your body because you don't want to feel that. Like I actually think it's
yeah.
It's like causing us to not be connected to our body because it's like, oh, I don't want to feel that. I'm gonna numb out with food and Netflix and weed and beer and whatever to just like not feel how challenging reality is.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's what I mean with the physical reality. Like you're stuck in that and you're staying in that, and there's no real, people don't have options or are not seeing the possibility they have in themselves to step out of that. But I think fiat money is a big catalyst in keeping people stuck in this physical world,
fiat
exploring the spiritual.
Fiat money is designed to keep you like that was part of the paradigm shift. Is I just thought, wow, like in a lot of ways we're just modern slaves. And people hear that and they have a lot of resistance to it, like, oh no, look how far we've come as humanity. And I agree with that. Like, we don't own slaves, but in a lot of ways, like the system just keeps us so entrenched and it stifles our creativity, our passion. Like, no wonder the mental health crisis is what it is, because like people don't have a lot of freedom to follow what their system is telling them to do. Yeah.
What we're talking about with fiat money is that it's so invisible. Like you don't know that you're a slave to debt because you spend your finite time and energy to get a reward that another person that, as we talked about, is the same as you and me in its essence, right? Coming from the eternal consciousness, is using a system made by other people to gain an advantage over you. So they can print units of a money at will by the press of a button, and therefore devalue the reward that you got for expending your finite energy and time. And if you just, take yourself out of the equation and just look at it objectively, trading, as a human, trading finite time and energy for reward that other people know better than you can create infinitely at will is the dumbest thing that you can do. And as long as you're not aware of that, you're a slave to those people, literally, right? And because also in a debt-based money system, when you take on debt and the units you use to pay it off get worth less and less, you are just being put on this hamster wheel that, if you don't understand what you're doing, which ties into the beginning of our conversation, you are totally unaware of what is happening to you, and you just think you're doing it because everyone is doing it, right?
Yeah,
But
it's
that
just
is
what we
what keeps
do.
it alive. Yeah.
Yeah, and the system needs more, and every generation it takes more money to live the same kind of a lifestyle. Like if you look at in the 80s, in the US at least, like I look at, you could live on one income in the 80s and you could have like a house and maybe a vacation home and like all the things. And now to like do that, you need two people working, and the amount of debt and leverage that you need to live that kind of lifestyle. And yeah, the whole system is extractive, meaning that, you know, they steal your wealth via inflation, but they just want it to be at 2 or 3% so that it's not enough to where you really feel it. They just want it to be invisible. And yeah, this question, like if someone's new getting into this, it's like I just always thought that inflation was like this natural thing that just happened. Like things get more expensive. That's just how markets work. And it's like, no, that's actually not the nature of a true free market. That's just because, somebody can create money out of nothing and it steals from everybody else. Like the very nature of the fiat system is based on theft.
Yeah, that's wild, don't you think? That realization is,
Yeah.
I think the fork in the road. If you think, when you're listening, well, some people that listen regularly know this stuff somewhere or to a deeper level, but if you're hearing this for the first time, I think this is exactly what I meant with the fork in the road. So don't assume that what we are saying is correct without doing any of your research. Do your own research and try to figure out if what we're talking about is correct or not, right? That's the only way for you to actually get to the fork in the road. And then think about, okay, what do I do with this information? Well, one, how do I go through the confrontation with the fact that I was probably super unconscious about this part of my reality? And then after that, it's kind of like, what do I do with this? Do I ignore this because it's super, super uncomfortable? I'm pretty fucked up, especially the older you are, the more fucked up it is, I think, to realize. And the harder also to.
And the more you realize, like, if you have kids, like I know you have kids, I have kids, the more you realize that, like, oh, it's just disproportionately affecting each generation. And millennials have felt it compared to like the boomer generation. Just imagine if we continue in this system, like what that's going to look like for our kids. They will own nothing. Like that, that's just how it's going to end up being. And so, yeah, for that fact alone, for the future generation, it's a worthy cause.
And so when we think about, the proliferation of AI, the increasingly accelerating deflationary forces behind that, right? Like if centuries are going to happen in the next 10 years, and this is how I talk about AI, like AI is democratizing productivity amongst people, but also eventually amongst the machines, right?
Yep.
So your cognition is enhanced to a degree, like it's enhanced with this thing in your hand, right? You're basically a cyborg with the phone in your hand. Like the technology is an extension of your body and your brain to that sense, right? But AI is a few steps even further. So on one side, you're enhanced with this technology. On the other side, your intellect is also being harvested in a sense by AI, right? And there will be this global blob of human intellect that's also being democratized. So yeah, how do you look at that? Like how do people I'm thinking about what to say. Like what are the risks to the evolving of human consciousness if we don't understand this? Because I do feel that if you don't understand what is happening with AI, it's going to be a big shock when you realize what is happening, which is this basically dissolvement of your human intellect. I don't know how else to define it. Maybe you have a better one. If you're not prepared for that, it's going to be very hard mentally. So how do you look at that kind of like clash that's going on? And maybe also where does Bitcoin tie into that for you?
Yeah, like I think decentralization, like I said, is this big theme. And that's part of the risk with AI is if AI is just used to centralize more and more power and control in the hands of a few, which I think is happening. You see the amount of investments going into these big AI companies. And if there's only a few people that are programming how AI is responding to everybody, like you can influence the minds of everyone that's interacting with it through these subtle tweaks. And so that's a huge risk, in my opinion, is the centralization of AI. And if it's just used based on the old consciousness of control and manipulation, then all it's going to do is just exacerbate the problems that we've had in the existing system. And so I don't really have any good answers, but I think one thing is once AI gets more smart and you need to interact with it with money, why would an AI accept any money that can just be created out of nothing? I think Bitcoin will become the native currency that an AI is going to want to use. So there's that side of it. And then the other side is this: how can we create decentralized AI systems where people can have choice to plug into the models and have it be open source, and so you can see what the bias is on what's programmed into it? Because if we're just trusting these big institutions, and if there's malintent behind it, that's going to create all sorts of downstream consequences. And so that's where I think the consciousness piece, like the more mature stages of consciousness, you can start to see all of these complex adaptive systems. And the question becomes like, cool, there's all this technology that I'm using and it's doing all of these amazing things. Is it doing good or is it harming people downstream? And so, yeah, like AI, in my opinion, is only as useful as the consciousness behind it, the human consciousness that's programming it. So if we don't have, again, people that are awakened and can see all these different perspectives and that have humanity's best interest at heart, then whatever's programming it is just going to be programmed for war and hatred and division and all of the things that the existing system already does. It's just putting gasoline on the fire. So there's a risk. There's a massive risk to it. And if we can get it right, like there's so much potential, but it's the next 10 years are going to be quite crazy.
think one of the things that I learned along the way is there's always a good and bad, right? There's no good without bad, and there's no bad without good, and so there's always these two ways that it could go.
There's always opposition and opposing forces and everything.
Yeah, but well, if we go towards the positive direction, that you mentioned, it doesn't mean there will also be people that are doing bad, right? There will always be people that do
totally
bad stuff. And by the way, doing bad things for one person is actually doing a good thing, right? So that's also even the whole perception of how totally. You see reality, however you judge that. And so I'm thinking about how do we make this practical? I'm thinking, this is happening anyway.
Yeah, this is happening.
To prepare for it, right? And thinking about the beginning of the conversation where we talked about, the data and the Bitcoin time chain is a truth that you can anchor yourself to, and once you get there, it's an invitation to also walk or investigate, the more inward path, the path of consciousness or self realization. And perhaps getting there could kind of be like the antidote, like adopting Bitcoin plus trying to develop yourself in a more conscious way is a way to build a little bubble around you for the craziness that's going to happen, because that craziness is going to be very hard to predict. If AI is just a compounding technology in a sense, like I said, it's Bitcoin AI consciousness for me. So every day I'm working with AI and trying to build stuff and seeing new tools and whatever. It's crazy how much you can do in so little time, and then to realize that this is the worst that AI will ever be today, right? Tomorrow it's already better, and like what you can already do is just mind-boggling. And so I don't even think it's like 100 years in 10 years. I think it's probably going to be like 1,000 years in 10 years.
Yeah.
Just from my personal experience with...
I'm with you.
Just the pace and seeing what you can do. And so
I'm hesitant because I don't want to scare people, but I agree with you.
I think it's way more than you think, to be honest. So.
Yeah, I don't think we're quite ready for it. And to your point, like that's where I think the more we can get, and this is starting to make its way into Bitcoiner conversation, is like consciousness, inner work, becoming like trusting yourself as a node and your own inner truth, and knowing that there's something deep within you that you can trust, and creating that capacity. And so, I think the more we can get Bitcoiners specifically to like awakened consciousness, there can be so much good that can be built. And so, I'm launching this beta group. I have some ideas around kind of this Bitcoiner journey and overlaying it with the consciousness journey, doing some of the meditative breath work, like the inner work that we're talking about. And so if anyone's interested that hears this, they can reach out. I've got a small group of Bitcoiners that I'm going to be doing this with to get some feedback on it. And then I'm going to be launching some offerings around it where we have, groups of like 10 or 12 people, and we're comparing this Bitcoiner journey to this inner work consciousness journey for those that want to go inward and do some of this inner work and upgrade yourself, upgrade your own ego, and learn how to be more embodied and come from a place of wholeness. So that's coming down the road for me. I'm excited about it.
I love that. That's dope. See, that's what I love about Bitcoin, is that it invites anyone to eventually create something and participate and contribute in their own way. So I absolutely love that you're doing that. Are there any like practical steps or mindsets you think people could adopt to kind of like navigate this period of transition? Or like how would you help someone or invite someone who is interested in what we're talking about into like their next step?
Yeah, I think stillness is really important. Finding space to, like, I think we're overstimulated. I also think that with all of this information and the constant barrage of like dopamine that our systems are getting is creating nervous systems that I don't think humans' nervous systems have ever been this overwhelmed in the history of our evolution.
Yeah,
and so, yeah, I mean, I don't think our brains are wired for the amount of information that we consume. Like, it's just never happened before. And so there's this barrage of information. And so learning to come and find stillness, disconnect from, all of the input, and be able to go inward and like be with yourself, be with the uncomfortable feelings and see what's there, and really be like kind to yourself and give your system space to be able to relax. That way, when you do engage with the technology and AI, you can come from a place of stillness and wholeness, and where you're doing it consciously and you're choosing to build with it, as opposed to like this constant need for more and more dopamine to distract from what we're actually feeling in the body. So yeah, a lot of my work is around embodiment, meditative work, breath work, somatic work, and figuring out like, how is it that my own fears are showing up in what I'm building? How is it that my own fears are showing up in my relationships with those that I care about? Those types of things I think are really important. And then my experience is when you do some of that inner work and heal some of the parts of yourself, this human experience is just overwhelming. We're all dealing with, different traumas and things that our bodies have dealt with and different reactions to it. And so giving ourselves space to heal, and I think to also be connected to the earth. Time outside in nature is, and there's lots of new research that's showing up for that. And so, yeah, I think it's a return back to like slowing down a little bit, slow down so you can go fast. And yeah, I have a lot of other thoughts on it, but I think inner work to really heal your own nervous system and come from a place of wholeness and abundance and stillness is what's needed in this fast-paced, crazy world that we're living in.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I think this is also what we're seeing, like more and more people are moving towards that, although I think we also see the polarity grow. But I'm thinking about how I view Bitcoin is this parallel mirror, right, to fiat money. And so as long as Bitcoin exists, you have something to push against this predatory fiat money system. And I think when the people that adopt Bitcoin show that they are less anxious, more happy, more optimistic about the future, better prepared for this time where, all these big cycles, but also, you know, technological advancements in our reality are actually happening, that if we are better prepared for that, that will also be an invitation for the people that are on this other path, right? And they will be looking at us thinking like, why aren't they so affected by this craziness here? Like, why aren't they captured by that? What am I actually doing, right? And then getting to that point that we started the conversation with, is just the realization of, am I doing what I'm doing in a conscious way or not? And if I'm okay enough or brave enough, or however you want to call it, to accept that I'm doing all these things in a totally unconscious way, okay, what do I do now, right? And then that is the invitation to perhaps cross the bridge to that other side, and improving.
Yeah, totally. And going back to like what we talked about earlier, there is this, we need to like talk about Bitcoin and spread the good news to people. We talked about that. And obviously if it's coming from this need to be right, like that can be met with resistance. But my experience too, like all the people that I've told about Bitcoin for years, there's an interesting thing that happens when they just watch you and your conviction and what it enables for you in your life, and how you're able to embody the values that Bitcoin, that you're preaching. How can you really live that like that speaks more than any words that you could say. And that's what I hear you saying is like, oh, if people start to see, hey, what's going on with these Bitcoiners? I started to see it in 2018, 2019 when I was listening to them. I didn't quite know what they were talking about. A lot of their ideas made me uncomfortable. It challenged my worldview, but it felt like they were onto something and they had a different view on reality. And then when you watch and see what Bitcoin enables in your life, and don't get me wrong, there's still Bitcoiners that are doing things for the wrong reasons, and there's bad actors in Bitcoin. There's bad actors everywhere. But I think the incentives that Bitcoin aligns on on a layer of trust, where we can trust and verify in a world that, like, digitally speaking, it's getting harder and harder to know what's real and what's not. And so if you can build on that layer of trust, and then allow yourself to go inward and free up more of your time and resources on a Bitcoin standard. My own experience is that, like, I can't even believe what Bitcoin has enabled for me. If you would have told me back in 2018, that I would, like, in 2025, I would quit my job and just like try to build something, I'd have been like, you're crazy. Bitcoin in a lot of respects enabled that for me, and enabled me to have the shifts internally and to be in a place where I could take that type of a risk. Yeah, we need more Bitcoiners to be awakened and to be bold and to live from a deep place within their own soul. And I'm totally inspired by podcasts like yours and the audience and Bitcoiners in general. I'm so excited to see what we can build over the next 5 or 10 years. And it's going to be turbulent. It's going to be difficult. We're going to be tested.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be super, super interesting. I think that's why I am so happy to have a seat in the stadium and try to contribute to see how this all will unfold.
Yeah.
Maybe two questions to wrap up. So, looking ahead, what is your vision for how Bitcoin, AI, and this evolving consciousness might shape the future? So, either leadership or society, or whatever you want to talk about. But, like, what is your view of the future?
Yeah, I think if we get it right, Bitcoin can enable an era of peace and abundance that we can barely even comprehend. We're entering a period of, you're already starting to see it, significant kinetic conflict and wars. And when you really break it down, the system needs war to function. There's economic incentives. You need to create these conflicts. And so on a Bitcoin standard, everything gets flipped. The incentives of politicians, of leaders, there is no longer an incentive. I don't think Bitcoin totally gets rid of, like, human nature and, the aggression and boundaries and, the things that create wars. But on a Bitcoin standard, you better have a damn good reason to go drop some bombs on people, because you're only funding it through taxation. You can't create money out of thin air to fund a war. And so that's one of the big things that I love about Bitcoin, is that it flips the incentives of those that are in power, where they actually have to do the things that the people want them to do. And it enables peace. And I think on a Bitcoin standard, it enables more people to be connected to their own. I truly believe that each of us has a reason we're here. We're each one of one. There's nobody like Brahm that can do what you do. And each person, like, but the system tells us how to act. And so the more we can step out of the existing system and step into our own inner knowing and live from that place and enter a flow state. If we have so many humans doing that, like, I think the world could get, like, better than we can even begin to imagine.
I think that's a lovely view of the future, something I would also love to be a part of. Um, I wonder how long it takes before we get there, but um, I'm happy we are at least attempting to contribute to something like that.
And I think that's what, like, the more I'm seeing that, I don't want to be all sunshine and rainbows like this, unicorn guy that has this vision of this utopia, because I do think that the next 10 years are going to be so challenging. And for the old to break down to enable something like that to emerge, like the old has to break down, and it's already breaking down. The old system is dying. And so, but if we can have that end goal in mind of what could potentially be birthed out of a breakdown, that gives me the hope to be able to continue building through what is going to be difficult. It just is. Like, I don't see any other way around it. And so, yeah, I don't know how long that takes for that type of a vision, but having more people seeing that that could take place out of this is what's going to allow us to have hope. Like, that's why, Saylor talks about it. Bitcoin is hope. And I know that you have to do a lot of work to get to that conclusion, but I think that Bitcoin, what it enables, is a very hopeful future.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I would love to ask you my last question, which I ask everyone the same question, which is, what is a core belief that you will never let go of?
That's a very interesting question. And I think over the years, I would have had different answers to that. My answer is that I aspire to live my life in a way that I have strong beliefs, but that I'm willing to change my beliefs when there's new information presented. And so I would like to believe that I'm not attached to my own beliefs so much that I would never let them go. Even Bitcoin, like, I think at some point, even Bitcoin has to be transcended and can't become the new religion that we're so attached to that it's the only way of life. So I'm sure there's something that I would cling to so much that I would resist letting go of it. But intellectually and from a philosophical viewpoint, I would hope to live my life in a way that there is no belief that I would not be willing to let go of.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for sharing. Thanks so much for your time in this insightful conversation. And yeah, let's see what the future holds, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Bram. I enjoyed it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, please like this video if you want to help shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, and subscribe to my channel to stay connected. I hope to see you for our next episode.